Welcome back to my channel. With less than a week until Aventurine's release, I think it's time to talk about him. Aventurine is an imaginary preservation unit, with his kit allowing him to also deal some decent damage through his follow-up attacks. I'm gonna be comparing him to Jeopard a lot in this video. It is what it is, it's because he's directly competing for the same role as a solo sustained shielder. I think before anything else, we should talk about his talent and traces first, because these will help with understanding the rest of his kit. So for his first talent, Shot Loaded Right, it does a lot of things. First, for any single ally with Fortified Wager, their effect res increases, and when Aventurine himself has a Fortified Wager shield, he can resist crowd control debuffs. I think this is pretty nice. He might not have a cleanse like other sustain units, but effect res to the entire party, and Aventurine being immune to CC makes it so he can always reapply his shield even if his entire party can't move. The second part of his talent is that Aventurine additionally gains Blind Bet after being attacked. These are the stacks that appear beside his icon, and upon reaching 7 of these Blind Bet stacks, he will consume the points to launch his follow-up attack. This is a multi-hit attack dealing damage to random enemies, and this is where most of his personal damage comes from. It gets a little more interesting when we get to traces. And for his first trace, Leverage, for every 100 of Aventurine's defense that exceeds a certain value, increases his crit rate. This is pretty self-explanatory. You just defense equals crit rate, and since his shields scale off of defense, you're gonna build it anyway, so you're just getting crit rate for free. His second trace is when the battle starts, grants all allies a Fortified Wager shield. This is the same shield as his skill, so you just start with the shield already on your entire team, which is a really nice trace. You basically start the battle with Jeopard E, and this also applies his talent, of course, so you'll always start the battle with the shield and the effect res on every teammate. And finally, Bingo, which is his last trace. After an ally with Fortified Wager launches a follow-up attack, Aventurine accumulates 1 blind bet point, so you get the stacks from taking hits and from doing follow-up attacks. When he does end up consuming the stacks and doing a follow-up attack, he then also provides a Fortified Wager shield to the entire party, stacking with pre-existing shields. This character is so overloaded that there's already so much, and we haven't talked about his actual abilities yet. Thankfully, they're pretty simple. His skill provides a shield to the entire team, lasting for a certain number of turns. And again, this stacks with pre-existing shields. So if he's giving like an 800 shield base entering combat, using his skill on his turn would give you a total of 1600, if the shield isn't damaged, of course. His shield, from what I've seen trying him out in the story, feels like half of Jeopard's. Maybe a little less than half of Jeopard's in terms of the actual scaling, but we'll find out soon. But because he can reapply it pretty often and for free, in most cases, half of Jeopard's shield before any stacking is pretty good. His ult gives him a random number of blind bet stacks, and then inflicts a debuff on a single target, while also dealing damage to that set target. What this debuff does is it increases the crit damage dealt to that enemy for the entire party, similar to like a Topaz Lightcone. That was his entire kit, and it's a lot, I know. And if you're still confused, here is 100% real, accurate, exclusive gameplay, and an example of how fights will look like in a follow-up team.
Existence is unity. Liquidation! Steady.
Yeah, my bad. I kinda deleted all my recordings and I forgot to save some of the gameplay, so you can try him out in the story. For his relics, there are a couple things to consider, and Leverage is one of them. It's one of the talents we talked about a while ago, since it does give him a lot of crit rate if you stack defense. So even if you want to build like more of a damage-oriented Aventurine, you still kinda want to think about the defense, because his defense is both helping his defensive and offensive capabilities, so you kinda want to keep that in mind when building him. For sets, I personally am gonna run a 4-piece Knight of Purity Palace, because I did farm this set a lot in the early game, Virginian and Jeopard, since it's in the same cavern. Other viable 4-piece sets would be the Pioneer for the free stats. It gives a lot of crit rate, crit damage, and since you're probably farming for Acheron, you can give him the defense pieces. I'm not sure if his ult counts as one debuff, so you just need to find another debuff in the form of a character or a Lightcone, which shouldn't be that hard. Lastly, the 4-piece Wastelander can be good if you're running him with a lot of imaginary units like Ratio, Welt, or Yukong. Given all that, I would try to farm at least a 2-piece Knight, and then using a different 2-piece while farming for a 4-piece Knight, because I do think that the shield strength increase from the 4-piece is pretty valuable. Also, you don't have to like actually farm the cavern, just synthesize it, you know, no one uses the lightning set anymore. For the ball and chain, I think that the broken keel set would be my easiest recommendation because of how much effect res he gives passively. The 2-piece Al Soto is pretty good for more personal damage, and the 2-piece Bellabog will give you the thickest shield. For Pure Fiction, and I think only in Pure Fiction, the Sigonia set might be okay for personal damage, but I don't know how much more of an increase that is from stuff like Sal Soto. But it is his set in the lore, so you know, if you want to use it for that reason, feel free. For the main stats, these are my recommendations. Defense or crit damage on the body, since he gets crit rate from defense. Defense or speed on the boots. Honestly, I don't think it's that bad if you can't hit a speed breakpoint and you have to use defense boots, because you get the shield at the start of combat and you will probably be able to refresh the shield, or stack the shield, sorry, before you even need the skill on Aventurine. In most fights, assuming it doesn't get one shot by the enemy as soon as you get in, you're probably okay with defense boots. Defense or imaginary damage on the ball, and defense or energy regeneration on the rope. Just a tip, I would try to max out his crit rate passive by looking for defense before trying to use stuff like an imaginary sphere or a crit damage body instead of using defense main stats. If you can max out the passive through subs, then feel free to use whatever. For substats, look for crit, defense, and effect res. Aventurine's Lightcone is pretty insane. High base defense and a defense increase on the passive. It also increases the crit damage of all allies by 40% and provides damage reduction. This thing sounds really busted, it's a really good signature, but it's not the only option. Moment of Victory is pretty good actually, and this will be his second best in slot if you have it, because it is a standard banner Lightcone. I wanted to recommend it because there's a chance that a bunch of us have this, and if you're replacing Jeopard with Aventurine, and you might as well give him the Lightcone as well. Concert for 2 is another Lightcone that will be on the banner. This is a new preservation Lightcone that increases your damage dealt for each shielded ally. This at S5 will actually be pretty competitive with an S1 Moment of Victory, but you probably will hit Lightcone pity before you get this at S5 if you have normal luck like the rest of us. So since it's new, I don't think a lot of people are gonna get this, on this banner at least. Destiny's Threads and Texture of Memories are the free-to-play options in the MOC and Herta shops respectively. Destiny's Threads will be more damage and Texture of Memories will generally be more shielding with the same builds. Trend actually doesn't look that good personal damage wise, at least for the follow-up and ult, but for Acheron teams this will be a good option, and the dot damage that it gives isn't that bad. Overall, this is how I'd rank the Lightcones damage wise. Aventurine and Jeopards are on top, Concert for 2 S5, Destiny's Threads S5, after Concert S5, Concert at S1, Fushuan Lightcone, which I don't know why you'd use this on him, just put it on your Fushuan. If you have this, you probably have Fushuan. Day 1 of My New Life, Texture of Memories, Trend of the Universal Market, but I think it's really good if you're using him on an Acheron team. We Are Wildfire and Landau's Choice. Keep in mind that it's hard to quantify the taunt value of Lightcones like Landau's, so while it is really bad for damage, it can help with your team survivability. Don't get me wrong though, this Lightcone's kinda bad on him, just use one of the free-to-play options. For teams, honestly, as a sustain unit, he is just good as a fill option in most teams. You don't build teams around Aventurine, you build Aventurine to complete teams. He can replace Jeopard, Locha, Gallagher, Lynx, and characters like that in every generic team as a sustain unit, and he's probably replacing Luocha in mono imaginary comps. For follow-up teams, there is a really good core, and that of course is Topaz and Numbi. Topaz is a character that wants a lot of follow-ups on her team in order to get Numbi to go again. Aventurine is someone who wants follow-ups on his team in order to refresh shields and do damage. Both of those together is an insane combo. I got to try this with my Topaz in the trial and it felt really good. Just complete the team with other follow-up characters like Ratio, Jingyuan, Herta, Himiko, depending on the content, and you can kinda just brute force anything. Clara is also someone that I haven't or wasn't able to test with Aventurine, but since Aventurine will be targeted more often because you know he's preservation, and if you're using something like Moment of Victory, he has taunt value. I know Clara has taunt in her kit, but I'm not sure if Aventurine hinders Clara from doing damage, because you kind of want both of them to get hit, so I'm not sure. Sorry Clara mains. For buffers, you mostly want universal buffers like Tingyun or Sparkle for your main carry, Ron May for damage percent, pen, and speed, really good for duo carry, Pela for shred and the strip, Yukong for the attack and crit buffs, or Asta for the speed and attack. Honestly, anyone works as a fill slot, maybe a Harmony user in the future, and I will be testing a lot of these teams when he does go to live, since I messed up during the story and I kind of just sped around his part. If you made it this far, please make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing and maybe leave a comment. This is probably one of the videos I've spent the most time on, at least recently, and hearing feedback would be appreciated. See you guys next time.